Bueno, aquí estamos nuevamente en el Centro de Meditación Victoria, con todos nuestros amigos del planeta Tierra, en donde con Verónica Rafferty, que se encuentra en nuestra pantalla, seguimos compartiendo este emprendimiento que es la caminata cósmica, en donde a través de una visita guiada, con el solo hecho de inscribirse y respetando el protocolo vigente de salud, vamos recorriendo los distintos fenómenos del cosmos, del universo, desde el Big Bang hasta el presente, y terminamos con una contemplación guiada, simplemente en silencio, en un árbol, tratando de hacernos conscientes de la historia de nuestro propio ser. Esto es una iniciativa de Verónica Rafferty que se lleva adelante en la República Argentina, en el Centro de Meditación Victoria, donde además, bueno, tenemos talleres de meditación, talleres de mindfulness, todos personalizados, y bueno, y un montón de encuentros y charlas que por el momento la estamos haciendo online. Hoy estamos con Verónica Rafferty en Verónica por Dos, transmitiendo, compartiendo con ustedes una tierra maravillosa y digna de admiración. Hola Verónica, muy buenas tardes.
Hola, hola, ¿cómo estás?
Muy bien, muy bien. Estamos con nuestros amigos en Sudáfrica y es una tierra que verdaderamente desde Latinoamérica la conocemos principalmente por su naturaleza impresionante, por la riqueza que posee en su flora y en su fauna, también por otras situaciones un tanto desagradables, pero que han tenido la fortaleza y la integridad y la siguen teniendo de haber generado líderes capaces de haberla superado. Estoy hablando particularmente de Nelson Mandela, que es un referente que este centro de meditación admira profundamente, porque tuvo la capacidad de abordar las diferencias de manera pacífica, que consideramos que es lo que en este instante en todo el planeta Tierra tenemos que empezar a desarrollar o continuar desarrollando algunos otros. Bueno, Verónica, el tema que nos convoca hoy es bellísimo, se llama Vida Solidaria. Nuestros amigos, John y Elizabeth, en Sudáfrica lo denominan ecología y solidaridad. ¿Por qué ecología? Porque la ecología son las condiciones propicias para que se desarrolle de la forma más armónica posible la vida. Todo lo que sea una manifestación de la existencia y de la vida. Y eso también es lo que precisamos ahora, las condiciones más propicias para que la vida continúe lo más armónica posible. Y una de las herramientas para concretarlo es justamente eso, respetar las diferencias y ser solidario con todas las personas de nuestro entorno y más allá de él. Bien, Verónica, vos nos dirás quién es John y Elizabeth Oliver en Sudáfrica y qué están haciendo.
Bueno, tengo la alegría de conocer a Elizabeth y a John, es un matrimonio que han participado de nuestras reuniones y nos han guiado en varios encuentros, tanto en Sudáfrica como en Dublín, Irlanda. Y están contratados para este fin de año de seguir guiándonos. Como los dos, cada uno tiene un rol diferente. Están en este día, han preparado una presentación sobre un proyecto que se llama Goed Gedacht y que significa buenas ideas. Y enseguida ellos van a hablar en inglés y yo voy a traducir por parte su presentación. Así que adelante, off you go now, Elizabeth and John. We're all ready to hear all you want to tell us about that wonderful project.
Thank you very much, and good evening. We'll just open the share screen quickly and then start the slides.
Yes.
It's lovely to be with you tonight.
So while John is going to the PowerPoint, to say that we've chosen this phrase, ecology and solidarity, because it speaks of the time that we are living in. And we both are part of the greater Dominican family, and St. Dominic invites us to look at the signs of the times, and through our contemplation and our thinking about the world, to become participants in this changing world. And so we wanted to talk about a project that we've both been involved in different ways, where they have had to look at changing from how they started to being able to be still relevant in today's reality of COVID and life that has changed.
So, él me está diciendo que siendo miembros de la familia dominicana, ellos a través de la contemplación y de leer los signos de los tiempos, les ha parecido bueno compartir con nosotros con este título, Ecología y Solidaridad. Y han estado casi 30 años involucrados en un proyecto que enseguida nos van a contar. Okay.
So the background to the project that we want to talk about is really rooted in Catholic social teaching, and particularly Pope Francis's talk from the 5th of June in 2013 at a general audience, where this phrase of human ecology and environmental ecology walk together, I think was the first time that he used that phrase, and it's been repeated again and again in documents like Laudato Si. And this project for us really embodies that spirit of the connection, the deep connection between human ecology and environmental ecology.
Bueno, para ellos este proyecto es una respuesta a lo que recién en el 2013 el Papa ha utilizado una frase que se ha hecho ya común, que la ecología humana y la ecología ambiental están íntimamente vinculados, caminan juntos, y ellos ven que eso se expresa a través de este proyecto.
So the next slide is a little bit of just geography to give you an idea of where we are. You'll see Cape Town down at the tip of the map. That's where John and I live. And John's put the cursor on it. And this project is about 90 kilometers from Cape Town into the more rural area where there's farming of particularly wheat, a lot of olive groves, vineyards where they grow grapes for the wine. It's also an area where there is a lot of challenge around water. So it's an area that can suffer great drought. And 2 years ago in Cape Town, we suffered an enormous drought where we all were severely limited in the amount of water we can use. And it was even worse in this particular area, and they are still struggling to recover from the drought. Mm-hmm. So you'll see that we don't live on this beautiful property that we'll show you, but it's getting easier and easier for us to travel when we need to be there and participate in whatever is happening there.
Yes. Elizabeth and John live in Cape Town, which viven en Cape Town, donde ahora ven en el mapa, y a 90 kilómetros, donde va el cursor, es donde está la granja, allá arriba, en Riebeck. Y ahora les resulta más fácil llegar hasta allá. Es una zona que tiene problema de agua, porque hay mucha sequía, y eso ha ocurrido en Sudáfrica. Hace 2 años tuvieron una sequía muy, muy grave, que fueron así totalmente racionado el agua. Y en esa zona donde está esta granja, solidaria hay olivos, hay viñedos y mucho cultivo de trigo.
So this is just an aerial view of the farm. It is called goed gedacht, which is a Dutch and Afrikaans word for a good idea or good thoughts. And the farm is owned by a trust. It was set up in 1992, partly under the auspices of the Catholic Archdiocese, and initiated by a couple, Peter and Nan Templeton, who were pioneering social workers in the Cape Town Archdiocese, and with a number of friends, raised the funds to purchase the farm.
Bueno, en el año 92, la Arquidiócesis de Cape Town, la ciudad de Cabo, invirtieron en la compra de esta granja con un matrimonio de apellido Templeton y que con otros amigos juntaron suficiente dinero. El nombre significa buenas ideas o buenos pensamientos. Y es un trust, que quiere decir que es como una fundación. Okay.
We'll talk a little bit later about different things that are done on the farm, but just to give you an idea from this photograph, that's where the cursor is in the middle of the farm, or the middle of the picture is the old farmhouse, which dates from the late 18th century. And to the left of the picture here, you see some of the olive groves where the olive plantations are housed, some of the farm buildings. There is an interfaith chapel near the top of the picture there. Simple, beautiful chapel which is used for services, liturgies, weddings, that kind of thing. And then this area in the middle is accommodation for the conference center. And we'll tell you how that's being used a little bit later in the presentation.
Bueno, en el centro del cuadro, de lo que estamos viendo la foto, está la casa original, the original. Could you put your cursor on it, John, the center? Yeah. Eso es donde él indica ahora, es la casa que data del siglo, fines del siglo XVIII. Y a la izquierda nuestra está donde están los olivos, y hacia atrás hay un centro de oración compartido con distintos credos ahí, y además hay otro centro de conferencias que más tarde va a hablar de eso.
That's just a beautiful picture of the original farmhouse as it's been renovated in the late afternoon sun. It's under that big, beautiful oak tree. You'll see bales of straw, and they're getting ready for a reception. So often wedding receptions are under that beautiful tree. When they first moved to the farm, all of the buildings were very broken and had to be renovated. And they were very grateful that they could preserve the original farmhouse.
Esta es una renovación que se ha hecho, y la foto se saca al atardecer de esa casa de la granja original. Y el árbol grande delante es un roble. Es un lugar muy buscado para hacer ceremonias de casamientos, y en este momento se ve que, dice ella, que están preparando para una ceremonia de ese tipo. Pero todos los edificios que estaban ahí estaban en muy malas condiciones cuando compraron el terreno este.
And just another view of the farm. All I really want to say about that picture is just that although the land is incredibly beautiful when it has had rain and slopes on the southern side of that mountain looking down towards Cape Town, it's also an area in which there's great poverty. And the people who live in the valley and who work on the farms historically have had to deal with very poor living conditions. And so the story that we're telling is about a beautiful farm, but also in the context of great poverty.
Esta foto muestra la belleza del paisaje después de lluvia, cuando llueve, y lo que el contraste es que las personas que han vivido en esa zona han estado en condiciones de muchísima pobreza, y va a hablar más de eso más adelante, pero el proyecto está iniciado justamente para colaborar y mejorar las condiciones de las poblaciones alrededor.
So the Grootgedacht Trust, when they first came, we're not going to give a year-by-year account, but the deep question and concern for both Peter and Anne, who have such a love for the rural communities, was how do you reach into the depth of poverty that was there and begin to create spaces where the farm workers and their children can flourish and can find a place of recognition. Part of the suffering post-apartheid time is that people like these farm workers would be almost forgotten people working as laborers on the farm, paid poorly. And on the wine farms, often part of their pay would be to give them some wine, which creates a depth of another problem called fetal alcohol syndrome. So one has children who are born with all sorts of difficulties. So, you know, that's the background within which the thinking was around how does one look at the human landscape and begin to create opportunities for people to grow.
Bueno, Elizabeth nos cuenta que el matrimonio primero, que los innovadores, Peter y Dan, su preocupación fue cómo mejorar las condiciones de estos peones de las granjas alrededor, que en la época post-apartheid fueron olvidados. Su condición era de muy poco pago por su trabajo, y en vez de darles dinero, a veces solamente le daban vino. Entonces eso creaba una cultura de alcohol, y muchos niños nacieron con el síndrome fetal de alcoholismo, y eso ha sido el enfoque del trabajo de este matrimonio, del primer matrimonio que trabajó en el proyecto. Era cómo conseguir mejorar las condiciones, levantar la dignidad de esta población en extrema pobreza.
So today the phrase that the project uses to describe the development work, community development work, is asset-based community development. When I started getting involved, both John and I knew Anne and Peter from Cape Town days. I started my involvement with the community development in about 1999. And the language we used then to describe what the outreach was to try and develop an integrated, holistic project. And so the arms of the project would have been these areas that have grown over the years, particularly starting with education in the middle and looking at the children. So the very first intervention was, how does one reach into the lives of children? Children are farm worker children who didn't complete even their early schooling years, who had great difficulty integrating in the educational system. And so their very first project on the farm was a little preschool for children under the age of 5. And gradually projects developed to reach into the after school activities of children. There was from the very beginning a realization that one needs to look after the resources, the natural resources. So the Care of the Planet projects also started. Today, a big arm around sustainable farming, both on the farm, but also working with local farmers. And for the staff and the people involved in working on the farm, a great emphasis on social and personal development for the adults, and looking at health-related issues, big issues around TB as well, malnourishment, fetal alcohol syndrome, caring for mums during their pregnancy.
Bueno, ella se vinculó al proyecto en el año 99 y lo que fue, lo que está acá en la mitad del plan que estamos viendo, educación. El beneficio para los niños de tener una escuela, pero preescolar, decimos aquí, menores de 5 años, y fue una manera de llegar a ellos y sacarles de ese deterioro que a raíz de las condiciones de sus familias. Después pusieron actividades post-escolares, es decir, después de la escuela, unas actividades a la tarde. Después vino el tema de salud y los dos primeros en la lista, luego que todo esto había que integrar el cuidado del planeta y una granja sostenible. Entonces, todos estos elementos o aspectos lo iban agregando de a poco, ¿no? Okay.
So we'll talk briefly about the Sustainable Development Plan for the farm, and that consists mainly of these 4 elements: the conference facilities, the trading, something called Help the Rural Child, and the fundraising. The conference facilities, as we've mentioned a little bit already, are used for small meetings, well, meetings up to about 60 people you could accommodate, weddings and retreats, which in normal times, not like the COVID-19 times, weddings could have up to 80 or 100 people there, and retreats for smaller groups, usually about 16 to 20, 24 people will come for retreats, either guided retreats or just quiet time on their own.
Yes. John está hablando del desarrollo sostenible y los elementos de este plan que tienen allá son utilizar las salas de conferencia para retiros, para casamientos, para las mismas conferencias, o las personas pueden ir a estar solos en tiempo de silencio. Eso es el uso de esas facilidades. Okay. I've done the first one, John, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And so when we look at the Goedgedag trading, you saw the previous picture, the beautiful olive groves, and here are some more. They had to start almost from the beginning planting olives, and now have, I don't know how many olive trees, but wonderful olive groves. They've just finished picking the olives. They pick in May, May to June. And the olive bottles that you see at the bottom, they make their own olive oil on the farm. They pickle their own olives. They have a number of produce that they are selling, and they have links with some of the big industries in Cape Town. So it grew from a very small project to now being a very significant project, and thank goodness have been able to continue working during this time. And my own background is one that loves olive oil and olives, so I have a soft spot for this project.
Bueno, él sobre desarrollo el aspecto del cultivo de los olivos que han desarrollado desde nada en la granja y que ahora es algo que ayuda a sostener el resto de los proyectos. Tienen en mayo y junio cosechan los olivos y está terminado ahora ese trabajo. Por suerte, durante la pandemia pudieron continuar, no se ha cortado. Y en las botellas vemos el maravilloso aceite. Ella misma dice que tiene una preferencia para el aceite de oliva personal, así que siempre puso mucho interés en este aspecto. Y a mí me hace pensar en La Rioja, ¿no? Cómo desarrolló también el cultivo de los olivos. Okay.
This trading, trading is headed up by Robert Templeton. He went and lived in Italy for about 6 months and worked on olive farms to begin to learn the basics of the trade. So it's lovely to see it flourishing now.
Uno de los señores Templeton, Robert, fue a Italia para poder estudiar el cultivo de los olivos, la producción del aceite, etc. Así que trajo todo ese conocimiento.
And one of the ways in which people support the work of the farm is through charity shops in the city, particularly Cape Town. There is a range of shops called the Help the Rural Child Project, and these are very popular. These are clothing shops selling secondhand clothing and bric-a-brac, things that people no longer want and need to use but are still good to sell. And on books, particularly bookshops in a number of different parts of Cape Town. And these shops are well supported, and they help to fund the work of the Goedgedacht Farm.
En la misma ciudad de Cabo existen todos estos negocios caritativos de beneficio, donde la gente dona ropa para revender, donde donan cosas que no les sirven, donde vemos los niños con las bolsas, bric-a-brac lo llaman, y después también libros. El tercer círculo habla de eso, donde la gente dona libros. Y existen varios de estos, no solo 3, sino varios. Y estos son para sostener el trabajo de la granja.
So one of the, as you can imagine, the deep challenges of trying to keep a project, a community development project going is funding. And although a big income stream is funding from organizations like Miserior and other Caritas International, and the real beautiful part of an income stream, if you want, are these dedication walls. And they are linked to the olive groves and the olive trees, and people can make a donation that of a smallish amount of money, which will plant a tree and look after an olive tree for a year, and they can dedicate it to all sorts of needs in their own life. So for many people, it's a memorial wall where they buy a plaque for someone who's passed away, or celebration of a wedding anniversary, or just a special prayer request or a gratitude symbol. And these are about 3 times a year. These plaques that you see on the wall are put up, and there's an invitation to people who have participated in this dedication wall project. They come to the farm, there's a dedication service, and you see a group of people here being able to go and visit the memorial wall in the midst of the olive groves. And this is a rainy day, one is grateful for if you're the farmer, but sometimes if you're a visitor, it's a little bit wet.
Bueno, está hablando ahora de estas paredes que 3 veces al año se juntan las personas que de alguna manera están presentes a través de una placa dedicado a algún ser querido que ha fallecido o un aniversario de casamiento, etc. Diferentes motivos, pero ayudan, también han donado dinero o fondos para los proyectos y estas paredes están colocadas dentro de los olivos y son muy emotivas las ceremonias cuando vienen todas las personas que tienen ahí un nombre en la placa.
And these are just a few of the pictures of the buildings that are used as part of the conference center. It's a simple accommodation, but beautiful, and there are some room.
Son alojamientos donde las visitas para las conferencias o retiros pueden alojarse en distintos espacios.
Okay.
Gracias.
So one of the, I suppose at in the heart of all the busyness, this beautiful world offers a space for retreats. Many people go on their own just for some quiet time. There are often organized retreats. There is a chapel that can be used. This is looking towards the chapel. It is an incredibly beautiful chapel. It has a big open window overlooking the mountainside. There are, that's looking at from the chapel door out to a rose garden and a beautiful spot to sit quietly. And just behind it, that's the beginning of a labyrinth where, again, for people to take time to reflect and be still. All sorts of people use this venue as a retreat space. They're a group of artists who come for about 2 weeks and have an art retreat. There are writers who come on a writing retreat. The natural environment is just beautiful. So it offers a safe haven and a place of stillness in the busyness of life, as well as the busyness of looking after the local community.
Bueno, está mostrando 3 espacios que mucha gente viene del ruido de la ciudad y encuentran un lugar de silencio, de belleza. Vienen grupos de artistas por 15 días, vienen grupos de escritores, de todos lados. Vienen y tienen desde la capilla que está a la izquierda y la vista desde ahí es de un jardín de rosas y un espacio para estar. Y acá abajo, a la derecha, está en un laberinto que está en desarrollo, que es otro método de entrar adentro y de encontrar quietud.
Another way in which people support the project is through donations for specific events or for specific occasions. And every year in July, we have Nelson Mandela's Commemoration Day. It's a public holiday. And there's become a practice for people to either do something for 67 minutes of the day or donate money, 67 Rand, which in this case was for a project to make blankets for children. The significance of the 67 just comes from the 67 years that Mandela had in public service. Those were the years, including the years he spent in jail, which were in the service of the community. And so the Nelson Mandela Foundation has encouraged this every year, that people go out and either donate 67 rand or dollars or whatever it is, or give 67 pairs of socks to a poor family or community that needs clothing, or in this case, donating children's blankets.
Describe John ahora Acción contra la Pobreza, que cada año en Sudáfrica hay un día que es una fiesta nacional, feriado nacional, y es un día para acción contra la pobreza. El número 67 que vemos ahí en la mitad del cuadro es referente a los años que Nelson Mandela dedicó de su vida al servicio de la comunidad, incluyendo los 27 años que estuvo preso en una isla. Bueno, y en este póster la campaña es para hacer una frazadita para los niños del campo. Está dirigido a los niños del campo.
So one of the projects that the farmers developed over the years is known as the Bridge Leadership College. And essentially it is to create a bridge between children leaving school and needing to find jobs in the local community. Because historically what has happened is many children did not complete school because of either lack of funding or lack of support or facilities at home to complete studies. And even if they did get to matriculation, it was then very difficult to find jobs. So the Bridge Leadership College tries to do two things. It tries to provide practical skills training for young people and also to provide leadership training for young people so that they will both take into the community practical skills. It could be anything like repairing bicycles or what needs to be done in order to harvest the olives, or any one of a number of things that needs to happen in the community. We'll talk a little bit later about the vegetable gardens. Mm-hmm. But it's really to create a bridge for young people so that they are not left floating free or unable to find work after they finished school.
Bien, John. El título de este colegio es El Puente, el liderazgo. Y el puente está dirigido a jóvenes que terminan escuela y todavía no han encontrado un trabajo. Y se les enseña diferentes oficios, hasta cómo remendar una bicicleta, cómo cosechar los olivos, etc. Y está dirigido a jóvenes que desde la familia no tienen el apoyo necesario para terminar o seguir estudiando, y que especialmente a ellos se les ofrece este espacio. El edificio está ahí, arriba a la derecha, y ya ven que los jóvenes están ahí estudiando. Muy bien, gracias, John.
So here I could talk for about 3 days about this, so I'll try and control myself and not say too much. But these, do you want to translate that first? Yeah.
Yes. Él se ve, está muy cerca de su corazón, dice que podría hablar 2 o 3 días sobre esto, así que se tiene que controlar y limitar. Bien.
So really this over the past 20-something years has been the heart of the community work. These community centers, initially just on the farm and then a little further out to the closest town, and eventually branching out quite a distance in the area to different communities where there was absolutely nothing for children and young people. So you'll see a little preschool. That's the preschool that's on the farm. It's probably the biggest of all those facilities, because one of the early childhood development is key to any child's future capacity. And for these children living on farms, there's hardly access to transport into the town where there could be a school. So the initial outreach was to provide the basic building block for children so that they start off with a better hope. And then the centers provided an after-school facility. I think for me, it was a complete revelation to see how little these children actually have access to. They would go to school and need to make a project. They don't have glue, they don't have lights in their house, they don't have a magazine to cut a picture. So creating spaces where children from a rural community can do what they need to do to be able to keep flourishing in school. Also looking after their health, have the local clinic come to administer their vaccinations or do health checks. The staff working in the school were very often young people who'd been trained. So developing the capacity of the local young people to give them an opportunity. So these pictures are just trying to give you a little taste of some of the work that grew bit by bit each year.
Se extendió la influencia de esta granja original a zonas así aledañas, con un servicio de salud, como ven ahí el móvil que va de un lugar a otro y vacunan y chequean la salud de los niños especialmente. Y también ella fue una revelación para ella, viniendo de la ciudad capital, de ver cómo en el campo no tenían transporte los niños para ir a la escuela, o si iban a la escuela no tenían medios para participar de armar ni revistas para recortar, nada, no tenían nada. Entonces estos servicios, hay dos cuadros que muestran jóvenes en uno y niños en otro, recibiendo y teniendo un espacio con todos estos medios a la mano. Para ella, evidentemente, como docente, esto es su entusiasmo, este es su proyecto favorito.
So just to say a little bit more, you know, if you are working with children, what also became very obvious is that you needed to support the parents in their parenting capacity, but so parenting workshops started happening to help parents, supporting mums who are pregnant so that they can begin to understand what their own needs are, but also how to assist their children, particularly educating around drinking while you're pregnant and the harm that causes. But also discovering that people can't get access to the social grants because they don't have documentation. So helping adults in partnership with the local Department of Social Development to apply for the documents they need, to apply for the grants. So trying to bring either resources to the facilities, the different centers, or help people to get to the resources that they need to have access to.
Bueno, gradualmente se dieron cuenta que los adultos también necesitaban distintos apoyos y educación. Las madres embarazadas, que fuera peligroso tomar alcohol durante el embarazo, y la cuestión de documentación, muchos adultos no podían acceder a los subsidios del Estado porque les faltaba documentación. Y así como un aspecto más se iban agregando para ayudar a los que son padres.
Okay, so No, we're not quite sure why the slide is being lazy. There you go. So when you are faced with such poverty, on the one hand, on the other hand, you have harsh environment with little rain and people struggling to survive. One of the core projects was beginning to develop an understanding around climate change and its impact on the environment. And we don't have a picture of it, but there's a wonderful climate change walk, a discovery walk on the farm, where each stopping point tells you something about climate change. As an educational project. They began, there's big recycling on the farm, and there's around the recycling, particularly kitchen waste, there can be a little bit of an argument. Go to the next one, because there's a big biodigester which creates methane gas and powers some of the stoves in the conference center's kitchen. You'll see water awareness around drought, and there's a spring that's alive in the mountain. It keeps giving water, which is one of the blessings on the farm. And there are some solar panels. So there's also an awareness raising and an education around the climate change and ecology, and how does one live in one's environment in a more respectful and resourceful way.
Bueno, es multifacética ahora, este nuevo que gradualmente llegaron a ver la importancia en un contexto de mucha aridez, de extremos, que era particularmente difícil. Entonces, el tema del agua, yo nunca supe que se puede cosechar la neblina, pero ese es uno de los detalles acá en cuanto al cuidado de agua. Y por suerte en la montaña tienen una fuente, y está el tema de los diques también. Tienen una caminata, yo pensaba que iban a decir caminata cósmica, pero no, caminata sobre el cambio climático, señalando en la caminata cuáles son los aspectos donde se nota el cambio climático en el planeta. Han instalado paneles. Sí.
Si podemos interactuar con algunas preguntas de nuestros amigos, porque ya tenemos como un panorama muy completo y puntual de la forma en que John y Elizabeth trabajan por iniciativa personal y con la colaboración de aportes privados en la naturaleza, en una granja, en una comunidad de habitantes en Sudáfrica de extrema pobreza, y de la cual pudieron salir gracias principalmente a lo que es la salud, la educación y el trabajo, con herramientas y elementos muy sencillos como lo que acaban de describir, pero desde luego con mucha fuerza y trabajo. Es decir, plantando árboles, hicieron olivos, se aliaron con comercios solidarios, generaron escuelas, generaron distintos servicios móviles de salud, pero principalmente yo quiero hacer eje en esto, ¿no? En saber compartir y desarrollar lo que es el conocimiento, la educación, y sacar a esta comunidad que se encontraba en una situación muy débil hacia una dignidad construida por sí mismo de manera sustentable. No está ajeno a todo esto lo que es la contemplación, lo que es la meditación. Lo acaban de decir, hay una caminata en donde van observando, asimilando lo que es el cambio climático. También muy, muy, muy bello lo del árbol, un árbol donde la gente simplemente asiste y concurre en un árbol de roble, y también es un lugar de contemplación y meditación. Y me gustó mucho lo del laberinto porque es casi una metáfora. Ese es un laberinto concreto, pero es casi una metáfora de lo que es la vida, ¿no? Muchas veces nos metemos en vericueto y desconocemos por dónde está la salida, y sin embargo, concentrándonos y desarrollando el sentido de la orientación, llegamos a la solución y vemos la luz y hallamos la salida. Principalmente la única pregunta que tengo es decirle a John y a Elizabeth primero un profundo agradecimiento por compartir este momento con nosotros y preguntarles, ¿no? De qué forma el trabajo solidario con la persona que es más débil puede llegar a neutralizar o, en muchos casos, eliminar la violencia.
So John and Elizabeth, Veronica's underlined the things that have impressed her, and she would like to interject at this point a question to both of you. And how do you see this work contributing to reducing violence, your work for the dignity of these poor children and so on? How do you see it contributing to that climate change, the climate of violence in society?
I think it has been deeply transformative for many of the children who have participated in the projects at whatever level they can. So when I first started, one of the projects I was involved in was working with the youth. They used to have a youth group for different age categories. And in that particular project, it was helping young people who live in the midst of lots of family violence, lots of alcohol abuse, pregnancies at young age. And I would go out about once a month. And in the early days, every month.
Could I stop there just to translate, Elsa? I don't want to lose any of this. She's talking about her own, se está hablando de su propia experiencia con un grupo de jóvenes que una vez al mes ella se encontraba con ellos, vivían en situaciones de gran violencia, tanto violencia doméstica como violencia social en su barrio. Okay, Elizabeth, go ahead.
Yeah, so through this gradual opportunity to stop, reflect, think, learn skills like in the Leadership College, participate in activities in the youth centers, and giving hope, understanding how alcohol contributes to violence. So I would say the educational input began to change people's sense of understanding of what's happening for them and also giving them hope. And we'll move on to the, as we talk about that, the next project, which looked at sustainable living. So when you are without hope and you are hungry and you can't really change your circumstances, what can you bring into a community to give a sense of agency and an ability to change things for yourself? And one of the most helpful projects in the latter years has been what they call community gardens. And at the community centers, down the bottom picture, and the top one is a community garden in somebody's backyard. The youth became involved in establishing these gardens and teaching people about bringing food into your own home. Even if you aren't earning an income, the project would give you seeds and education. So one shifts a culture of hopelessness by doing very practical things to bring a sense of agency and hope. And does that make sense?
Yes, yes, just I hope to do justice to you in translating. Él indica que uno que enseñaba a estos jóvenes el rol del alcohol en la cultura de violencia que había alrededor de ellos y en sus familias, y apunta a que el inicio de los jardines y huertas comunitarias ha sido muy transformativo en la vida, dándole esperanza. Ella apunta mucho al tema de que muchas veces el círculo vicioso de violencia se debe a que no hay esperanza, no hay salida de esto. Esto es lo único que hay para mí. Entonces, el deber y su contacto con la tierra, el ver crecer, el producir comida que lleva a sus casas, todo esto ha sido plantar no solo verduras, sino plantar esperanza también. Y ella ve que es clave.
Okay.
So that we've been giving you an overview of what the farm projects involve in the long term, and hopefully we will go back to all of those projects flourishing even more in the future. The food gardens have carried on right through the COVID time, but we want to talk briefly a little bit about how the farm has dealt with the COVID-19 crisis.
Ahora van a hablar de cómo han continuado, por suerte, las huertas comunitarias y los olivos y todo, se ha podido continuar durante la pandemia, pero quieren ver ahora la respuesta a la misma pandemia que han dado.
So when COVID-19 came into all of our lives, most activities from the farm and in the centers had to be suspended. And the question then was how to continue to care in partnership with local government and partners for the communities in which the farm works.
Con la llegada del COVID tuvieron que suspender casi todas las actividades de la granja y del centro. Y el desafío era cómo continuar para cuidar a la gente junto con el gobierno local y todos los que colaboran, los colaboradores.
So a 7-step plan was developed, and just to briefly talk about what these 7 steps were, the 6 community centers, or Path Out of Poverty centers, as they were known, have become feeding stations, providing 5,168 meals daily, feeding up to 1,200 vulnerable families in the valleys. COVID-19 recovery centers. Sorry, Veronica, I'll wait until you translate each one.
Ok, sí, hicieron un plan de 7 pasos. El primero era el tema de la comida y dan más de 5.000 por día, 5.000 comidas para las familias más vulnerables. Ok. Número 2, the second one. Han puesto centros de recuperación con 32 camas, más de 100 pacientes.
So some of the buildings that we showed you earlier on, the Bridge Youth Academy particularly, and one of the old larger buildings next to the original farmhouse were turned into wards for recovery centers.
Así que transformaron estos lugares de retiro para proveer camas para los que necesitaban víctimas de COVID.
And then the vegetable gardens that Elsabe talked about just now, that has continued, and that has become even more important in the time of COVID because of people losing jobs and needing to provide food for themselves. So gardens have been developed, and also seed packets have been distributed to a lot of the gardeners.
Y con COVID mucha gente pierde su trabajo, entonces más importante que nunca la huerta común, la huerta por casa, y ahí está el número de huertas que han promovido 1.670 y también han repartido este número de paquetes de semillas, 4.000 y algo.
2 social workers and a community worker supporting farm families at risk. So they've continued to do that work, visiting families that live on farms nearby and assisting people who need help getting to hospitals or children who need medication and all sorts of other ways as well.
Hay 2 asistentes sociales y una voluntaria que visitan las familias de las granjas alrededor, y si alguien tiene que ir al hospital, proveen un vehículo, etc. O si hay que conseguir medicación, ellos se ocupan de ayudarles.
And then direct community support for help with people who are dealing with unemployment to claim unemployment insurance benefits, helping people deal with substance abuse and gender-based violence.
Ayudan el apoyo a la gente desde el gobierno, si hay subsidios para desempleo, ayudan el tema de adicciones y en violencia de género.
And then the community centers will also be, and are in some cases already being used as testing and tracking stations by the local hospital.
Sí. Estos centros que están en distintas partes de la granja se utilizan ahora para hacer los testeos y para ver por dónde vienen las infecciones, los contagios.
And then one of the small ways in which the trading company hopes to make a contribution is to develop an immune boosting drink, which hopefully will be ready at the end of this month.
Y el grupo encargado del comercio de los olivos están produciendo una bebida que ayuda a fortalecer el sistema inmune, y esto debe estar listo para finales de agosto. Qué bueno.
So what has become critical and life-saving in this time of COVID is food distribution. And the 2 women, you see them preparing food in one of the community center's kitchens. And I think it's really important to say here, over the years of work in the different communities, a huge sense of participation in helping my own community has grown, a volunteerism. And now it's that capacity of people's generosity that is being drawn on to help look after your own community and to work together with the project leaders and the various departments. So these are just some pictures. You want to translate, Veronica?
Un fruto evidente en este momento que es tan beneficioso para la comunidad es que se ha desarrollado un sentido de cuidar a la propia comunidad. Entonces se presentan voluntarios enseguida con la crisis de COVID para preparar la comida.
So you'll see the pop Uber, that's delivering food to people in the community who can't come and fetch, and the young men and women there are all part of either the youth or the center parents who are helping. Those are the local farmers delivering produce. Those are sweet potato that's used to make the food.
Okay.
And the plastic, that little queue is the packets, is the queue for food. They are to give 1 hot meal a day, and the children come and they put down their containers in a little row like that until waiting for the food to be ready.
Bueno, estamos viendo que el grupo de jóvenes, que son también el fruto de los talleres y encuentros, que son Pop Uber, es decir, ya han puesto el nombre de los taxistas. Ellos distribuyen comida al que no puede venir. Y a los que vienen se forman la fila y dejan su contenedor a la mañana en una fila ordenada. Y los granjeros que tienen allí batata, un camión que está dejando una tonelada de batata para hacer la comida. Gracias, sí, good.
And there's another, it's like a vitamin fortified porridge called EPUP that has been donated. And here you see a little girl who's received her supplies. Because in this time, one of the great tragedies, I suppose, of COVID is the malnourishment that is beginning to be noticed in children. So there is a huge effort to distribute this EPUB so that children can at least once a day get this well fortified porridge.
Han desarrollado una avena fortificada con vitaminas para que los niños tengan por lo menos una vez al día algo para fortalecerles. Una de las consecuencias de pandemia es eso, que hay malnutrición, desnutrición de los niños y quieren evitar eso con este invento que han hecho de la avena fortalecida con vitaminas.
And then just briefly before, as we close the presentation, just to show you inside some of the accommodation facilities which were used as recovery centers. And the idea was that the people who would use these centers would be people who themselves were trying to isolate because of COVID-19, but in very crowded townships, very overcrowded, and not much living space themselves. So we were able to just use the rooms and facilities just to give people simple but beautiful accommodation while they were recovering.
Han prestado sus centros para proveer un espacio para la gente que están viviendo en villas y que no tienen espacios y tienen que aislarse, y es un espacio de reposo y de recuperación. Muy bonito, evidentemente.
So that really is the presentation, and that just gives you the website of the organization. And I must just thank one of my colleagues, Graham Wilson, for some of the photographs that we used, and Elsaby for putting the slides together. And we'll close the presentation, the sharing now, and then join you in conversation.
Yes. Okay. Pero aunque ya terminen el PowerPoint y podemos conversar. Si tenía otra pregunta, Verónica.
Bien, sí, no, para ir despidiéndonos, con toda seguridad nos vamos a volver a encontrar en el curso de este año de manera online, por ahora. En cualquier momento nos podemos ir a visitar y meditar y contemplar allá y hacer una caminata, ¿no? Para conocer los efectos del cambio climático. Pero agradecerles, saludarlos, profunda gratitud por el servicio que están brindando. Título personal, insisto, como una iniciativa de orden privada, en donde la naturaleza viene a salvar al hombre y viene a brindarle las herramientas para poder superar este momento de adversidad que estamos viviendo todos. Me gustó mucho esto de que la solidaridad, el trabajo solidario que vienen ellos cultivando en esta comunidad de Sudáfrica ha generado un sentido de cuidar a la gente. Es decir, que el ejercicio solidario, el servicio solidario te da un sentido de cuidar a la gente. Esto es en Sudáfrica y en cualquier parte de la especie humana. Preguntarle que si Nelson Mandela viviera en este momento, ¿qué lugar hubiera elegido?
First of all, she's thanking you for the wonderful presentation, for your work, thanking you for your work there, and how wonderful to see that fruit of of years is now seen in service to the community by the people themselves who have been through the process. And she has a question for you, which is, if Nelson Mandela were alive today, where do you think he would be working?
It's a good question. Yes, it's a good question. I think he would probably be working very much in the same way that he did. He worked mostly in the biggest metropolitan area in our country, which is Johannesburg and Pretoria, the Gauteng area as it's known. And very like in Argentina, where Buenos Aires is the largest hub of where most people live. Gauteng is like that in South Africa. And I think he would always have been an urban activist. And he qualified as a lawyer. And I think he would have probably used those skills even more today than he was able to in the time that he qualified. When he qualified, it wasn't easy for Black lawyers to practice as lawyers. And that was one of the reasons why he went into the kind of social activism and political career that he did, was because the avenues that were not open for Black people to achieve freedom at the time had to be created and had to be built from ground roots upwards. And that was why he then became so involved in that kind of grassroots activism. But I think today he would certainly still be working in an urban environment. He would be a person who builds bridges and builds reconciliation between different factions and different communities. And South Africa, like most other countries in the world today, is very divided still. And I like to think that his charisma for building bridges and achieving reconciliation, he would still be very much doing today.
Yeah. So dice que estudió como abogado Nelson Mandela, pero como era negro no conseguía trabajo. Entonces empezó a dedicarse a la actividad social, al trabajo de base, y que vivió toda su vida en el gran metrópoli, en especial Johannesburg y Pretoria. Así que si hoy él estuviera, estaría trabajando como activista urbano, ¿no? Dice, como Buenos Aires es donde se concentra tanta gente en Argentina, bueno, se concentra mucha gente en Johannesburg y Pretoria. Y que piensan que él estaría trabajando para superar las divisiones, para reconciliar, para construir puentes. Eso fue su carisma especial.
But I think it's also important to say that
Bueno, nos despedimos, Verónica.
Oh, okay. No, Elizabeth tiene una aporte. First,
Just to say
primero
that
Elizabeth.
Yeah, his legacy today in the Nelson Mandela Trust and the Nelson Mandela Fund, they have quite a strong emphasis on early childhood development, and so have given funding to some of the projects on the farm where the children are involved. So you know, that's in his spirit of giving people opportunities to develop and their capacity.
Right. La Fundación Nelson Mandela se especializa o se dedica prioritariamente a apoyar a los niños en temprana edad. Entonces estaría él, y dice que ese fondo, esa fundación, contribuye a Hutgetak, también a la fundación de donde está John y Elizabeth. Bueno, de eso es para agregar un puntito más a algo que ha sido tan rico y tan inspiracional, ¿no? Inspirador para nosotros, y que es evidente cuando uno siembra durante mucho tiempo, eventualmente se ve la cosecha, ¿no? Y que con la pandemia ha provocado ese espíritu de solidaridad. En tantos países uno escucha todos los días lindos relatos. So thanking you, and I'm just saying that, you know, the pandemic has provoked solidarity in many countries in the world, wonderful examples, okay? So I just finish in English and say thank you, because Veronica will be saying the same in a moment, and we'll be cutting out. So wonderful, I'm so pleased, I'm so grateful to you for having taken part.
Thank you very
Pleasure.
much.
Nos
for
despedimos.
inviting us.
Nos despedimos de nuestros amigos que han compartido este momento bellísimo con nosotros, nuestros amigos online en distintos lugares del mundo. Hay 5 horas de diferencia, ya es de noche en Sudáfrica, pero bueno, esto se puede ver en cualquier momento. Buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches. Y me quedo con una síntesis del trabajo solidario en Sudáfrica que lleva adelante John y Elizabeth, ¿no? Plantar árboles es plantar esperanza. Muy buenas tardes y nos reencontramos en cualquier momento en la caminata cósmica en Verónica por 2. Verónica Rafferty, quien le habla, Verónica Banchero. Muy buenas tardes.
Thank
Buenas
you.
tardes.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.